Depression is considered to be the last stigmatized disease. In fact, there are a lot of people who don't even realize that depression really is a disease, and they don't get why those who struggle with it can't just snap out of it because the sun is shining. Well, we'll talk with someone who deals with depression and find out what the world is like walking around in her shoes. Courtney is someone who struggles with depression, and we'll spend a few minutes chatting with her. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Okay, now depression is a disease that is really misunderstood. So let's go back and let's talk about at what point in your life you really realized that when you were sad, it wasn't like when other people are sad.
Oh, that's such an interesting way to think about it. My depression has always been really severe. It's made it so that there are times in my life where I can't really go out into the world and do the things that other people do. That's definitely true. But I think for a long time I thought it was normalized. It was a normal reaction because everybody in my family is depressed. So it was just understood that you can't go out and do things that other people do in our family. It was more considered a family identity than it was considered depression. So for a long time I didn't get treatment because I thought that it was normal.
Because everybody around you was the same way. All right,
Exactly.
When you say that you can't go out and do things that other people do, give me an example.
I mean, I'm treated now, but back when my depression was really, really severe, it was almost as if all of my limbs were locked down. There was this sort of apathy about engaging in the world and this physical inability to even get out of bed.
Would you isolate?
Definitely, yeah. I wouldn't talk to anybody. I
Wouldn't answer the phone?
Wouldn't answer the phone. Wouldn't do any of the things that I want to do. The things that bring me joy. Definitely not, yeah. I was very, very thin back at the major points of my depression. Most people thought it was anorexia, but it had nothing to do with anorexia. It was that food no longer interested me.
All right, now tell me about your friends. I mean, did your friends understand or realize that you had something that was seriously wrong, or did you get hey, the sun is shining, go, come on, get up, what are you down for?
I think that it made it so a lot of people didn't want to be friends with me, certainly, because I didn't have like a bright and cheery affect especially. And the friends that I did have would occasionally become frustrated with me, and because I would never be able to go out to events with them because I'd say I was interested and then at the last minute cancel and not have a good reason. Or you can't cancel and say I'm depressed. You can cancel and say I have a cold, you can cancel and say I have a flu or any other chronic illness, but for some reason mental illness, if you cancel because you're depressed, people don't think that that's a good excuse.
What do you think the most important thing is for people to understand who don't deal with this and don't struggle with this? You know, and you and I were talking, and I should say for those who don't know that I deal with it as well, and I've written about it, and I do a play about it, and everything else. And for me, it's the thing I wanted people to know is that you can't just snap out of it. Those who don't understand, in terms of you, what is it that you wish that people got?
I think that the most important thing is everybody wants to help, which is a beautiful part of humanity. Everybody wants to heal the depressed and help them and make them happy again. And how they try to help is say, look how beautiful it is outside, or look at how great the world is. But what's actually helpful is being patient and being there with them and being able to reside in the darkness with them. And for me, the same. If people aren't scared away by my depression and they still want to be around me, if they're okay just coming over and being quiet in my apartment and watching movies and being okay with the fact that I'm crying or I'm not happy, eventually I'll get out of it. But just be patient and be there with me instead of trying to cheer me up.
All right, do you recognize triggers? I mean, do you know what your triggers are? Are there certain things that set you off?
Yeah, I do recognize my triggers, and that really helps.
What triggers you?
So I'm no longer in contact with my family, but if there's any sort of contact made, especially from my mother, that is very, very triggering for me. And I could be depressed for days to weeks, and often feel compelled to self-harm. So I have to be very aware. I need to tell people immediately that that's what I'm going through so they can be aware, and then they can also know to reach out. Because even though they're texting and they're calling, I might not pick up the phone, but knowing that there are people that care is so helpful.
All right, tell me what makes you feel better. Tell me what helps. You say you're in treatment, so I'm assuming medication.
Yeah.
What else? What helps you to get out of it? What's the rope that you can grab onto to pull yourself out of the hole?
I think anything that makes me feel like a worthwhile person, makes me feel connected to the world. So honestly, being able to help others is a big component of it, getting to do volunteer work and things like that. Or just doing anything that I feel like I'm good at. I like to paint, I like to write, I like to read, I'm in a book club. So getting to do the things that makes me feel like I'm part of the world rather than this unwanted pariah is what brings me out of it.
Would you consider yourself to be a fragile person when you're not in a bout, when you're not in a depressive bout?
Oh no, not at all, I'm extremely resilient. And I think that part of the reason why I'm so resilient when I'm not depressed is how grateful I am for the good mood and how grateful I am for being functional. So I make it work. I have one of my friends that describes me as the most alive person that she knows. It's because when I'm not depressed, I take advantage of it and I really try to live life to the fullest, and then people are shocked when they find out that I have clinical depression.
Now, when you're in a bout, and when a bout is bad, typically how long do they last?
For me, episodes last usually 1 to 2 weeks.
What's the worst one you've had?
I mean, there are different ways to describe worse.
Of
There's
course.
worse in terms of how long it's going on for, and then there's worse in terms of intensity. So the most intense experience that I've had with depression is, at times, it's just hard to be treatment compliant, and I've forgotten to take my Zoloft for a few days. And that triggered me into a suicidal crisis where I immediately started thinking about jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And it didn't last for long. It lasted just a couple of days, because then I started taking the medication, my body leveled out again. But but the longest lasting ones, I'd say, were anything that's triggered from acute grief. When my dad died, for example, I was very depressed for about 6 months. Being taken away from connections can have a really negative impact on my well-being. Being taken away from friends and things.
Has it harmed relationships, like romantic relationships?
Certainly, especially before I got treatment. So, and especially because people have their own internalized stigma about what treatment means. So I was living with somebody for years, and I was very, very depressed when I was living with him. And he said that he didn't want me to get treatment because he thought it would be like, I'd be a different person then. If you start taking medication, when you respond to things, is it you talking or the medication talking? So he really discouraged treatment. And it ended up being sort of the reason why he broke up with me. He said that he broke up with me because of how negative I was. And the week after we broke up, I went on a medication immediately, which was really nice. But it was years of, I can understand why he didn't want to be with me, because I would come home from work crying and just stay under the covers for hours, and I wasn't fun to be around during that time. But I think anyone who I think that anytime that he sort of made me feel ashamed for being the way that I was, discouraged me from getting treatment, discouraged me from wanting to get better. And it felt like my depression was prohibited. Anytime that people have said, it's okay to be depressed, I will be there with you, do whatever you can that will make you feel better, that has been very helpful for me.
Are you beyond that? Because that's a big beyond the ashamed part, because that's a big part of it, is because of the social stigma, is feeling guilty about it or being ashamed. Do you still deal with that?
Yeah, I think when I'm in the throes of depression, I definitely feel ashamed of it. When like right now, I'm not depressed, so.
Yeah, you're all smiles.
Yeah,
you
I'm
came
just
in
like
here
cheery, right?
Cheery and bubbly and.
Yeah, who would have thought? I forgot the question. I'm sorry. What was it?
I forgot the question. Shame.
It's shame. That's right.
Yes.
So when I'm in a good mood, I'm not ashamed at all. But when I'm depressed, I'm extremely ashamed, because I will just take any negative emotion that comes my way. If something makes me think, you can be ashamed of this, I will be ashamed of it.
All right. If there was one bit of advice, and we'll close with this, one bit of advice that you would give to others who struggle, what would that bit of advice be?
To people who are struggling, I think try to figure out when you're in your best states, identify those states, because those can be really hard to identify. When you're doing well, you forget about your depressed part. Try to recognize the times when you're doing well and use that energy to come up with a plan for when you're not doing well. So when you're doing well, maybe come up with a list of people who you know you can count on, or things that you know you can count on, things that you know that do actually help you, and let your well self be a guide to you when you're your darkest self. And another thing is the depression's tricking you. When you're depressed, you think you don't deserve help, you don't deserve to reach out, you don't deserve to feel good about yourself. Keep remembering that it's a trick. It is not the truth. And hopefully that can help keep you going until you feel well again.
That's great advice.
Thank you.
Thanks, Courtney.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brian.